Theresa May is once again on tour, today in Northern Ireland, striving for a new deal that both Europe and MPs can accept. This afternoon, she tried to reassure people that she's still committed to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and that there'll be no hard border after Brexit.
Northern Ireland does not have to rely on the Irish government or the European Union to prevent a return to borders of the past. The UK government will not let that happen. I will not let that happen.
But many firms in Northern Ireland feel aggrieved that they backed her on her backstop, and now she and her team are trying to change it.
Prime Minister, given that many business figures in this room may feel that you betrayed and shafted them on the backstop in your recent U-turn, why should they believe any of the pledges that you make to them today in terms of avoiding a hard border?
You've used the phrase U-turn in your question. There is no suggestion that we are not going to ensure that in the future there is provision for this, as it's been called an insurance policy, the backstop, that ensures that if there is the future relationship is not in place by the end of the implementation period, there will be arrangements in place to ensure that we deliver no hard border.
And she wasn't trying to drop the backstop, she stressed, just change it.
Well, I'm not proposing to persuade people to accept a deal that doesn't contain that insurance policy for the future. What Parliament has said is that they believe there should be changes made to the backstop.
That seems to have upset the ERG group of Tory Brexiteers who've been meeting this evening. MPs voted for the Brady Amendment to replace the backstop. One ERG source said not to modify it. Earlier at the weekly cabinet, the PM told ministers not to be distracted by talk of delay and focus instead on Brexit in 8 weeks' time, which the Defence Secretary echoed.
Well, very much looking forward to delivering the legislation for the 29th of March. And
so you think you're still on?
Sure. Absolutely.
And are you confident
Totally
the deal's going to go through now?
Oh, absolutely.
This afternoon saw another round of talks on the so-called Malthouse Compromise involving Tory Brexiteers and Remainers. Do you think there'll be something ready for Theresa May's trip to Brussels on Thursday?
Well, we'll see. As I say, we're having our second meeting today. And
I mean, that's the aim, though, is it, to get something for Thursday?
Well, we've not put a specific deadline on it, but we're working through as fast as possible. Clearly, there are lots of difficult technical issues to discuss.
The group want to extend the transition period by a year to the end of 2021, either to give more time to strike a long-term trade deal or alternatives to the backstop. Thursday's a kind of deadline, surely, because Theresa May's going back to Brussels on Thursday.
Well, I'm glad you told me that. I wasn't aware of that. But
you weren't aware of that, but I mean, you must hope to get something done by then, surely.
We are very positive about the outcome.
As Theresa May held meetings in Belfast this evening, the DUP said the problem is still the toxic backstop. Number 10 say they're still considering either alternative arrangements or a time limit or an exit clause. It's far from clear, though, what, if anything, the Prime Minister will take to Brussels on Thursday. Well, I just come back from the Commons where the ERG meeting broke up about 10 or 15 minutes ago. Should stress it was just their regular weekly meeting, not an emergency meeting. I spoke afterwards to Marc Francois, the vice chairman of the group, who said that they'd resolved at the meeting to continue the negotiations with Number 10 in favour of the so-called Malthouse Compromise I was talking about earlier. However, he said, a number of colleagues in the meeting had pointed out, following Mrs May's speech, that the Brady Amendment had said that the backstop must be replaced and not tweaked. And that was the mandate we gave the Prime Minister, and we would like to see her adhere to it.
Michael Crick in Westminster. Now, the UK economy is at risk of stagnation, with escalating uncertainty over Brexit undermining business confidence. That's the message from a closely watched survey of business sentiment, which today suggested that economic output is barely growing at all. Our economics correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi, is here. What does this really tell us about the state of the economy right now?
Well, I think the data underlines the Brexit paralysis that is undermining confidence. I mean, first, those bleak numbers from the services sector that you talked about. Remember, services is 80% of the UK economy, and the latest PMI survey data, bar one, is the worst in 6 years. And not just that, it's also the sharpest drop in new business since the financial crisis. And it's not the only warning signal. There's been a report by Deloitte that shows that finance directors from companies, 4/5 of them, are now going to cut costs and limit job creation. Now, John, the reason that's important is the UK labour market has been one of the bright spots, the few bright spots of the economy. And finally, I just wanted to mention a leaked document that came out of the steel industry that shows how worried they are about a no-deal Brexit, basically choking off all their exports. And remember, John, 2 years ago, the government swooped in to rescue this industry, and now the very same companies are facing a new crisis.
Is it all about Brexit?
Well, to be fair, you know, the economic data that came out of Europe today is just as bleak. The problem is that escalating Brexit uncertainty is happening just at the time of this global economic slowdown. Essentially, what you have is, a kind of domestic chaos wrapped in a global mess and kind of amplified by this fear that in 52 days, the whole system might come to a halt.
Are we headed for a recession?
I mean, that's the big question. Nobody knows. These figures don't show it, but they point to that dangerous stagnation as you described it. You know, now an optimist would say to you, don't worry, the government will get there, they'll find a deal, and then miraculously we'll have this Brexit bounce. But the truth is that companies are already seeing the toll of uncertainty. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Bank of England say on Thursday when they deliver their quarterly report. So far, the bank has kept to this line that Brexit is going to be orderly, it's going to be smooth, it's going to be soft. I think it's going to be very hard for them to ignore this latest series of data, and it could mean that they U-turn on their plans to raise interest rates.
Helia Ebrahimi. Well, now, one of the aims of Theresa May's visit was to reassure businesses in Northern Ireland. But did it work? Declan Gormley is the managing director of Brookvent, a manufacturing and engineering business in Belfast. He joins me live now. Can I ask you the brutal question, first of all? What does the backstop mean to you as a big businessman in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think the backstop is an essential part of the withdrawal agreement. It ensures that we don't have a hard border on the island of Ireland, and it provides some security for what the future trading arrangements will be in the absence of a negotiated agreement.
Do you feel that Northern Ireland is at the heart of Mrs May's interest? Do you feel loved or do you feel neglected?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do you feel that Northern Ireland's economic interests are at the heart of Mrs May's interest? Do you feel loved or neglected?
I think it's difficult to come to that conclusion when you see the flip-flop that's taken place from November to now. And clearly we understand that Mrs May is fighting a very difficult battle, even within her own party, to try to get the agreement across the line. But no, I can't believe that the economic interests of Northern Ireland are top of the list of priorities for her.
Could you just give us a sort of practical insight into what your business does in terms of before Brexit and after it? I mean, you currently ship loads of stuff into Europe, don't you?
Yes, I mean, Brookvent in some ways sort of represents a business which is a foot in both camps. We were 10 years ago 100% focused on selling into GB. We're having a very difficult time. 8 years later, we've just had a record year, and now nearly 60% of our business goes to export, and a significant amount of that figure is actually into Europe. So for a business like ours, it's very important that we keep the lines of movement open, that trade barriers don't exist, and that we can actually continue to do what we've been able to do very successfully for the last 8 years.
So the minimum you would want, in all honesty, would be a customs union.
Yes, a customs union and staying in the single market, I think, is the preference for the entire business community. I think one of the things which has occurred here is that the DUP are representing a particular standpoint. But I think people have to remember they don't reflect the view of the majority of people in Northern Ireland. 56% voted to remain, and they absolutely don't represent the views of the business community or the farming community. All of the major business organisations and the Ulster Farmer Union have come out clearly in favour of a backstop because of its importance to trade across the island of Ireland.